Hi guys, I'm here today to do quite a highly requested video. I'm going to be talking about how to get published. Now, disclaimer, this is not a video on how to write a book or how to write well, because those things are completely different discussions and also very, very subjective. Talking about how to get published is also quite subjective, but I can talk about it in a much more general way than I can how you should write a book. Different conversation, not one that we're going to be having here. Second note, I'm going to be talking about traditional routes of publishing, so publishing houses. I'm not going to be talking about self-publishing, which is not the route that I went down. I'm going to be talking about traditional publishing. If you would like to find out more about self-publishing, there are lots of other resources out there, but you won't find out about it here. So if you're new and you have stumbled across this video because you're looking for information on how to get published, then hello, my name is Jen Campbell. I am an author, a bookseller. I've worked in the book trade for 10 years. I've got 4 books published, 3 of which are non-fiction, a series called Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops, and one called The Bookshop Book. I also have a poetry collection out, which is a poetry pamphlet called The Hungry Ghost Festival. I also write short stories and children's fiction, which are separate projects I'm working on at the moment. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to get published, the routes that you go down once you have written something or on the process of writing something and would like to take it further. I'm going to be talking about 4 specific different genres. I'm going to talk about short stories, poetry, general fiction and general non-fiction. There are other mediums outside of that as well, but those are the ones that I'm going to be talking about. If you have questions about other types, you can leave them in a comment down below, because whilst in this video I'm going to talk about as much as I possibly can, inevitably I think some of you are going to have more specific questions, so please leave those in the comments down below once you finish watching this video, and I will make a separate video where I answer your questions. So first off, let's talk about poetry. Now, I meet a lot of people who say that they write poetry but they don't read poetry, or if they do read poetry, it's old poetry. It's like John Donne and Marvel and the Romantics. That is absolutely fine if writing poetry is something you want to do in your spare time as a hobby and it's for you or your family or your friends. However, if you wish to be published and this is a route that you want to go down, you need to be reading what is published now. Not because I want you to go out and copy what everyone else is doing, but because you need to understand the industry that you want to be part of, and you need to support the industry that you want to be part of. And that involves reading poetry that's been published now, taking note of literary prizes such as the Forward Prize in the UK, and subscribing to poetry journals, because poetry journals are where you're going to start off being published. So once you're reading what's being published right now, once you're taking note of different competitions and events and getting involved in the poetry world, and you are writing poetry, then the first step that you need to take is to getting published in literary journals, or hopefully winning or placing in poetry competitions. Now, there are lots of poetry journals out there and there are lots of poetry competitions. I have a list on the Poetry Kit website, which I will link down below, of UK-based poetry competitions, and there are lots of lists on different blogs and websites of literary journals in different countries, so you can easily Google for those. However, I can't offer specific advice on where you should be submitting your poetry to. It's a trial and error system, and you need to be reading the journals to see if they're a good fit for you, because every poet is different. You need to really invest time and love into this, which sounds really cheesy, I know, but there is no shortcut. The way that you need to experience this industry is by completely immersing yourself in it. So subscribe to journals, read what they're writing. If you think that there's a certain style of journal that will suit what you're writing, then submit to them. Always read the rules on the Poetry Journal site. Every poetry journal has different rules. They normally request that you send between 3 and 6 poems so that they can see what sort of work you do. Some of them accept simultaneous submissions, some of them don't. Some of them accept submissions through Submittable, which is an online submission platform. Some accept them through postal services. In some cases, poetry journals will pay. In some cases, they don't. It depends on what sort of thing they do, whether it's online, whether it's on print, how big their subscription base is. What I will say is that I don't particularly agree with reading fees, which some poetry journals request. I especially don't agree with them if they don't pay the writers when they are published. I think it's an entirely different thing if the journal is offering feedback and editing and all of that stuff. That is an entirely different service, but I don't think that you should have to pay $20 or however much money, because reading fees are more prevalent in the States than they are here, to just have someone read your work and then they might publish it and not pay you at all. I really don't agree with that. It's a practice that a lot of people have a problem with. Journal acceptance rates are normally less than 1%, and they can take a while to get back to you because they're normally running them in their spare time, and it's a labour of love, and they get a lot of submissions. I would recommend, if you're sending out to lots of different places, to create a text document on your computer somewhere which lists where you submitted to, what you've submitted, when you submitted it, whether or not it's a simultaneous submission, etc, etc. It's a really great way to keep track of stuff. Something to bear in mind is that if you publish poetry on your blog or on a YouTube channel, then that counts as being published. And poetry journals often request first publication rights, and therefore won't accept things for publication if you have already self-published them yourself on a blog or a website elsewhere. So that's something to bear in mind. Whenever I do videos here where I read poetry, it's poems that have already been published somewhere else, and I credit the magazine where they first appeared in the description box. Poetry journals should not keep copyright to your work. You retain copyright to it, but they get to publish it before anybody else. So after you have built up a list of credentials, be it with poetry competitions or in journals, then you can try and put together a chapbook. Now, chapbooks, I'm not sure how prevalent they are in other parts of the world, but in the US and the UK, a chapbook or a poetry pamphlet is the next stage that you would go to, and they are generally about 20 poems that you've collected into a publication. In the States, there are quite a few chapbook competitions where you submit your manuscript into a competition for publication, but in the UK, whilst there are some of those, mostly you would just submit for publication outside of a competition. Again, there are quite a few different ones, and I've listed some of them in poetry videos in the past, but as to which ones you should submit to, you have to decide that by reading their work and see which one you think would be a good fit for you. So if you submit to a publisher and they like what you have written, then they will agree to publish the chapbook. So for instance, the Rialto in the UK published my poetry pamphlet, The Hungry Ghost Festival, which consists of about 20 poems that I wrote, mingling mythology with childhood and growing up. Presses who publish chapbooks and poetry pamphlets tend not to make lots of money, and it is a collaboration between you as a writer and them as a publisher to help promote your work and their press. You should never pay to have your book published. If a poetry or any other publisher approaches you and says, hey, we'll publish your book if you give us this amount of cash, you should run far, far away. If an organisation says that they will publish your poetry chapbook, then they tend not to pay you in advance or royalties. What they tend to do is give you a certain number of poetry pamphlets as payment, which you can then go out and sell at poetry readings, etc., and keep the profit for yourself. They then also will sell your book through their website, and you can sell your poetry pamphlet through your website as well. So if you have your poetry pamphlet published, and that means that someone in the industry has said, we respect your work and we are putting our money into it, and that is a symbol to the rest of the publishing world too. So hopefully you will be invited to book festivals. You have to make the effort to go out and do things on your own though, go to spoken word events and stuff like that. The next step after that would be, as you grow your portfolio, to create a full-length poetry collection, which is normally 2 to 3 times the size of a chapbook, which you would then submit to poetry publishers, which are normally a publishing house, has a poetry division such as Faber or Picador, lots of other places like that, and you generally don't need an agent to do this. Agents are something that I'll talk about in a minute, but you tend not to. I have an agent, but I do all the poetry work myself. There is very, very little money in poetry. Most of the famous poets that you probably know all have full-time jobs. It is not a money maker. That's also perhaps another discussion for another time about that self-fulfilling prophecy of publishers not putting money into poetry and therefore it not selling, and that just perpetuates. I'm not saying that poetry would make millions, but I think it could make more if it was paid more attention by the industry. More on that perhaps another time. So, if you have written a full-length poetry collection, you can then submit that to publishers on your own. And if a publisher signs you up, you are likely to get a very small advance, sometimes none, but you will earn royalties as your book sells. And I will get onto royalties in the next section of this as well. So, short stories. Short stories are very similar to poetry in that you need to build up a portfolio, you need to be submitting to competitions. I'll leave a link to a competitions list of short story competitions down below. You also should be submitting to literary journals as well and reading other people's short stories, contemporary short stories, see what's out there, get involved. In the States, not so much here, there are chapbooks for short story collections. That doesn't really seem to exist in the UK. So again, like the poetry pamphlet, it might be something you want to investigate if you are in the States. But in the UK, generally speaking, you would go from having being published in a literary journal to having a short story collection. Getting an agent at this point probably would be valuable, I would think, especially if you were considering writing novels further down the line. Getting an agent on your side is really good, and I'll get onto that in a moment. That agent would then submit your short story collection to publishers on your behalf, and again, you'd probably get a small advance and then earn royalties as your book sells. So fiction, which I'm sure is what most of you guys are here for. Generally speaking, you don't need to have the list of credentials that you would for poetry or short stories. You don't need to have a list of I've been published in this place and this place, because novel writing is a slightly different beast than to poetry and short stories. I'm not saying it's more difficult, I'm not saying that it's easier, it's just different. And if you are a novel writer and not a short story writer, then of course you're not going to have written short stories and you're not going to have those published, and the only way you would get your novel published is having written a whole novel, and obviously no literary journal is going to publish a whole novel in one issue. So that is slightly less important. I would say that it is still important to show that you are passionate about what you do and that you have a platform. That is also helpful, though not completely necessary. It might be a blog, it might be a Twitter following, it might be a YouTube channel. I set up this channel actually after my last book was published, so I have not had this channel while a book of mine has been published. I just thought I'd answer that because people ask me that quite a bit if they're new. So having a platform and being able to reach people is important, especially at this day and age, being able to market yourself. But ultimately, what you obviously want is a good story and good writing. Speaking the obvious. If it's your first book, you need to write all of it before you do anything else. You need to write the whole book, you need to edit it, you need to be really happy with it, you need to spend time making sure that it is as good as you can make it. That doesn't mean that it won't be edited further down the line, but you need to invest the time in making sure that it's good. Don't get overexcited and think, I've written this thing, I'm going to send it to people, because you have one shot to make a good impression with each person you approach, and you want to make sure that that counts. So make sure that what you have written is complete and it is good, and you have taken it as far as you can on your own, and then you think, right, I need help now. So what I would recommend is that you get an agent. Some people would disagree with this. I think that agents are invaluable. I'm not going to say that too loudly because my agent might get a really big head. So, you know, Charlie, you're okay. You're all right. I actually might get Charlie to come on this channel at some point. I haven't asked him that. If you would like to hear from my agent, maybe we could have a chat about the industry. He's a nice guy, so I might do that at some point. I might ask him, Charlie, if you're watching, would you do that? So I would recommend that you get an agent. An agent is someone who is going to be on your side, and it's always nice to have someone fighting your corner, especially if you do not know much about the book trade. You need that person. Agents will submit books on your behalf. If you are submitting a book without an agent, a lot of publishers, first off, do not accept submissions that don't come from agents, so you're limiting yourself to where you can submit to. And if they do allow submissions, unless they're very small publishers, your submission is going to end up on a slush pile that an intern looks at. So it is very, very difficult to get published without an agent. Having said that, getting an agent is also extremely difficult because they sign you for life. And they don't make money unless you make money. Publishers obviously don't make money unless you're making money either, but publishers make more money than you do, and agents make less money than each individual writer. So they have to really believe in you to sign you up. I would recommend that you take a look at the Writers and Artists Yearbook. This is something that's published every year and has a list of publishers and agents. It has advice on how to submit to people. It's just all around a really good resource, and it tells you what agents are looking for, each individual ones, so that you can choose one that is specific to the kind of book that you have written. What an agent will do for you. So an agent will sign you for life. You might send them a book and they like it, so they sign you for life. You sign a contract with them. They will send out your work to publishers for you. They will negotiate payments for you. They will negotiate contracts. They will approach foreign publishers for you and get foreign book deals, so books in translation, which is great and something you probably wouldn't be able to do on your own unless your publisher did it for you. They take 15% of whatever you make normally, or about 20% if it's for foreign rights deals, because normally they have to share that fee with a foreign rights agent who can speak the language of wherever it is they're submitting to. However, agents will generally negotiate more than a 15% on whatever a publisher offers you. So they generally pay for themselves even before your book is actually physically published. I would also recommend checking out Nicola Morgan's blog. Nicola Morgan is an author and she's also a public speaker. She's written several ebooks on like how to write to agents. They're called Dear Agent. She's also got a blog called helpineedapublisher.com where she kind of breaks the industry down and talks about different things. It was a really great resource for me when I was approaching people all those years ago. So every agent has different rules of how to approach them. Again, read their websites carefully. Generally speaking, if you have written a novel, they will request that you send them a letter pitching your book and you, in a couple of sentences, the first 3 chapters of whatever it is you have written, and then a detailed synopsis of the rest of the book. If they like what they see, they'll request to read the rest of the book. If they like the book, then hopefully they will sign you on. They will then send your manuscript to many different publishers for whom they think your work would be a really good fit. Hopefully several publishers will like it. Maybe there'll be a bit of a bidding war. A publisher will make an offer as to how much they will pay you for that manuscript, and your agent will negotiate terms and you will sign the contract. The amounts that publishers offer as an advance vary so much that I can't even start putting figures on them. We're talking about several £100s to several £100,000 in very, very rare instances, like very rare. Those are the ones that get published all over the newspapers and make people think that authors earn a lot of money. So it varies vastly. Something to bear in mind also is that the amount of money that a publisher will pay you up front for a book is not everything that should be considered. You should be considering lots of different things, like whether they're a good fit, whether you think they're going to work hard for you, what you want to write in the future, and whether or not you think that they would accommodate what you want to do and whatever direction you want to go in. The amount of money that they offer you is also important though, because not only is that money that obviously you're getting paid for work you have done, but it's also a show of faith into how much money they're going to invest in your book. Because obviously if they give you, say, £5,000, £10,000 for your book, that's money that they have to earn back through sales. And to earn that money back, they're going to have to put effort into marketing your book. So that means that they're going to market it to get that money back. So whilst money isn't everything, it's also a good indicator of how much they think your book will sell. The advance that they pay you is normally paid in between 2 and 3 parts, depending on if it's your first book. If it is your first book, then normally they'll pay it in 2 parts. When you sign the contract, they'll give you half, and then when you have the book published, they will give you the other half. If it's your second book or third book, they might pay you in 3 parts, 1 when you sign the contract, 2 when you deliver the manuscript, and 3 when it's published. It really just depends on whatever the publishing company's standard policies are. So after you have signed this book deal, you will then be given an editor, and an editor will go through your manuscript and make any suggestions for changes that they think would benefit the manuscript. You then have to decide whether or not you want to make those changes. After you've discussed all of that, it gets sent to a proofreader who will then also discuss things with you and make changes, spelling mistakes, grammar, anything like that, any inconsistencies in plot as well. There are 2 types of proofreaders. There's a copy editor who looks for plot errors, and there is a proofreader who looks for spelling mistakes. From when you sign the contract to when your book comes out is normally about a year to 18 months, which might sound like a long time, but it's really not. They put so much into it that probably a lot of people don't think about. So during that year to 18 months, as I said, there'll be editing, there'll be jacket design, which is always quite exciting. Authors get approval. You might be asked about certain things that you thought should be on the cover, but ultimately that's designed by someone who understands the industry and what sells, but you get to say yes or no or suggest changes after they send a cover to you. You might also have meetings with marketing and publicity teams where they talk about a marketing campaign, what they're going to do to help promote your book, and then a publicity campaign where you might discuss things such as book tours, etc., etc. Be prepared to work very hard, because it isn't just writing the manuscript and sending it off. There's a lot of work that goes on after that too. So royalties, once your book is released and hopefully it starts selling, then you need to earn back your advance before you start earning any money. So for instance, if you've been paid £5,000, you need to earn out £5,000 through sales before you earn anything else. Contracts and specifics of how much authors earn varies depending on the author and the publishing house and the type of book that they have written. Generally speaking, a standard contract would mean that authors earn between 7% and 10% of each sale, and depending on the publishing contract, that might be net or gross. If it's net, then it is a percentage of whatever profits the publisher makes from the sale of that one book. If it's gross, then it is a percentage of whatever that book sold for at retail. So for instance, what the author gets will depend very much on where those books are sold. If it is sold in an independent bookshop, the author makes the most amount of money, and I use the term most amount of money very, very loosely, because bookshops will order in books from a wholesaler at about 40 to 50% discount. You earn much less if it is sold through Amazon. Chain booksellers sit somewhere in the middle. There are also things like special sales, which is when a publishing company agrees to sell the rights to, say, a supermarket or someone like the book people a license to publish a number of books, say 10,000 copies of a certain book, for a one-off payment. So that one-off payment goes to the publisher, the author gets a small percentage of that, and that percentage per book is much less than if those books had been sold through Amazon. Again, ebooks change vastly, but generally speaking, an author will get 25% net of ebook sales. Non-fiction differs depending on what kind of non-fiction you are writing. So it might be that you need to go out and research something if it's quite science heavy, and therefore if it's something like that, what you would do is you would approach an agent with a proposal for what you need to write and a budget of how much you think that would cost to create. If an agent likes that idea, they'll sign you up. They will then pitch that proposal to publishers who would then pay you in advance to write a book and give you a deadline. So it works slightly differently to fiction. So that's quite a lot of information, and I hope that it was coherent. I think there's quite a lot of romanticism and myth surrounding the book trade. I love working in the book trade and I love being an author. Most authors earn less than minimum wage. Most of them have other jobs. I have sold over 100,000 books. I still do other work, freelance work. I have other jobs. A lot of people also tell me, oh, I'd love to be a writer, I just don't have time. No one gives you the time to be a writer. You have to make the time. And I know that can be said for many different things. Most writers that I know get up at, say, 5 o'clock in the morning and work for a few hours before they go to work, or they're night owls and they stay up very late. Only you can write that book, and no one is going to say, hey, I know, I'm going to give you some time to write this book. If you want to write, if that's truly what you want to do, then you need to do it. You need to do it. And that sounds so simple. That's the answer. You need to do it. There is no secret code. It is a lot of hard work. And as I said, I love my job, but I work very, very hard, as do all of the writers that I know. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope I've addressed lots of different things. I'm sure that there's going to be so many things that I haven't talked about, and I'm sure so many questions that you guys are going to have too. So please let me know if this was helpful. Please let me know if you have any other questions about the industry, which I will answer in a future video. If you have questions specific to my books or my writing, you're also welcome to ask those questions as well. Questions, questions, questions. Let's have a chat. Leave me a comment down below. I hope you guys are having a really great week, and I will speak to you very soon. Lots of bookish love.